Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Project Egg podcast, the #1 podcast for entrepreneurs and startups to take their dreams and turn those dreams into reality. Today, we have an incredibly special guest. We have the fantastic Dave Lukas from Ohio. How you doing today, Dave?
I'm doing great. It's great to be on with you. It's great to be on with all of you in the audience as well.
Well, Dave, I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate you coming onto the show today to share with us. So let's jump right in, Dave. The first question that I have for you is, what is your story?
We got enough time for that? No, my story is it's like probably a lot of other stories that people tell. I actually kind of grew up in a weird kind of setup. So like half my family, one side was all entrepreneurs, really successful, from everything to the restaurant music to the music business, not even college degrees or anything like that, and they'd done that. And the other side of the family actually grew up dirt poor, literally in squalor, where they used to like sell cookies on the side of the street to make ends meet as kids and stuff to help the family and everything. So it's kind of an interesting, it's both my parents. So it's kind of interesting seeing those sides growing up. Now, cool thing is everybody made it out and was really, really successful. And so by the time I was born, a lot of that had happened already. So I had that to kind of model after and learn from. And so I actually started as an entrepreneur at a very young age. I started my first business when I was 5 years old. No joke.
Wow.
I had this crazy idea to sell American flags to all the neighbors. And so my mom and I made American flags, and when you're 5 years old, you're hitting every house on the street, 5, 10 cents for an American flag. Everybody's buying. It's a no-brainer. It's the easiest sale in the world. I'm going up down the street. I get to the final house on the street. And it's always that house, right? That's like kind of dark. The shades are always down. You don't see the people a lot, So I mustered up the confidence to go up to the door and do that pitch that I had perfected so well over the last 20 houses or so. And I said, hey, I'm doing my thing, American flags, and nice little old lady, sitting at the door, lets me do my whole thing, pauses for what seems like an eternity, probably about 5 seconds, and says, no, thank you, honey, we're Canadian. And slams through the face. So that was my first stab at rejection, but all is not lost. As entrepreneurs learn, okay, if that won't work, what will work? And, then we went back and we made a Canadian flag, took it back and sold it. So that started my entrepreneur journey, and then all through, school and even high school, had my own businesses, paid for college with my own businesses, came out, started a few businesses, failed miserably, learned some of the best lessons I've ever learned in my life as I did that. Went to the corporate world for a little while, for about 6 years, to kind of really learn that side of things, learn how to build systems and all that sort of thing that you need to do to build a business, all while investing in other businesses at the same time. Along that way, I've met my business partner in my largest business, Grasp Technologies, and that was about 15 years ago or so now. And really just got together. We started putting the business around the idea and took it from there. And here we are, as we call it, a almost 20-year overnight success. Inc. 5000 multi-time winner, doing business in 100 countries and all that stuff. So that's the fastest way that I could tell it, with giving you a little bit of that.
That's awesome. So I want to dig a little bit deeper back into your history, and I want to know that contrast in your family of half of the folks being successful entrepreneurs and half of them being, I believe you said, dirt poor. What was that like for you, and what did that teach you? What values did that instill in you that have now contributed to the person that you are today?
Well, I didn't say it, but that's how I started out too. That's how we started out. My parents, when I was born, had a combined income of about $10,000 a year, and I was literally the apartment that they could afford. I mean, there were hookers out front of it. You know what I mean? So. It was interesting to see. It was funny because my dad grew up. He was in the family was poor. They were Hungarian immigrants. They came over, and my grandmother sold Avon. My grandfather worked at the auto plant, Ford plant. And so they had a crazy childhood. We could write a whole book about just all the things that happened to them, and there were 5 kids and, all with their own sets of stories and all that type of stuff. So growing up, I got to, I got to see that at the end after they, all had made it out, they'd gone their ways, some successful as entrepreneurs, some like my father ended up being successful in the corporate world and others. So, but they always had that humbleness and that roots of literally, the priest coming to the house with food to help them out. My dad, stealing bread from the local bread factory that, off the lines that he could grab when he was like 8 or 10, or going and shooting rabbits and stuff to help put food on the table, and things like that, right? That's their roots of where they came from. So they really have that humility side, which is really cool. It really kept grounded for all the success that they had, because most of them are millionaires. And then the other side, was different in the fact that they didn't grow up that way, but they had to equally create and build their businesses and everything else. So that was my mom's side of the family, and my grandfather had done that. He actually came back from the war, World War II, and had started a jukebox business, and then had success with that. Went into the restaurant business, and he made one bad decision, though, one really bad decision. That if that had happened, I probably wouldn't be here talking with you today. He owned a number of restaurants. At one time, he owned, I think, 30 or 40 restaurants, of course, across Northeast Ohio. And McDonald's approached him when they wanted to enter the market and offered him the rights to McDonald's in Northern Ohio. And he turned it down because he didn't think a 5-cent hamburger would sell.
Oh, no.
So, but he ended up doing really, really well. He obviously, by the time I was born, he had sold out all of his restaurants and everything and retired and stuff. And his son, my uncle, ended up kind of doing almost the same thing in the music business, which was really interesting. Kind of growing up, he ended up for a time running all of marketing for Gibson Guitar and everything. So I got to actually meet like Aerosmith, and I've got pictures on my wall up there of that and stuff through that. So it was just interesting to see the interesting entrepreneurial weave that comes through and how people get to where they're at and everything, and then kind of take from that those lessons and learn that and put that into effect in your life and figure it out for yourself, because it never happens the same way twice. What worked for them doesn't work today. It's a totally different world. But the values and everything they instilled, across the board really do work and really serve as a grounding place for where I build things off of today.
So it's interesting that you talk about values, because that was actually my next question, is how, if you don't have somebody successful in your life like that, like you had so much good inspiration, so many people who did eventually achieve success, how do you go about and, I guess, get those core values? How do you seek that, and how do you shed any negative values that you may have had with your upbringing, get these new values, and how do you know which ones are good and bad?
Everything starts up here in your head, because here's the thing. No baby is born with their life predetermined and set. It's not like you come out of the womb and they say, "Hey, beautiful baby, too bad it'll never make more than 35,000." It doesn't work like that, right? The reality is that we are taught and conditioned to be who we are. And the sources of that include all kinds of things, right? Parents, friends, media, culture, school, religion, all those influences, everything, shape us from the time we're born to who we are. The thing that most people never, ever have happen to them in their life is the awareness that they actually have control whether to accept that or not. And that's one of the biggest, probably, epiphanies that anybody can have. Some people do it naturally. Some people, like me, do it through self-education and figure it out. But we have two minds. We've got the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind being the most powerful part of our brain that runs us without even knowing it. And that's where all this stuff is stored. And so 99% of the time, we react emotionally to things, right? We just react, right? We don't think. How often do you think to drive a car, throw a ball, just what you say, how it comes out, all that stuff, you don't think. That's all preconditioned responses to the situations and things that happen to you in your life. And so the ultimate power is when you learn to control that and learn how to recognize it in the moment and be able to change what you want to do and say and what you believe and make that make that work for you, right? So the ability, I call it your inner coach, to have the inner coach that actually stops you, where you can, and I call the process of doing a stop, ask, and choose, where you stop yourself in the moment. You ask yourself, is this the reaction or the response that I want to have? And then you choose whether to go forward or not. So for example, you don't have to live by your past. You don't have to live by the fact that, well, these bad things all happen to me, so I have to be this way. It doesn't have to happen like that. It doesn't have to be like that. Like I said, when I was born, I had hookers outside my house, my little apartment, right? I could have stayed in that world. Like my parents didn't make it successful till I was, way off in almost to college and stuff. So that's when they found a lot of their success, right? So I grew up in that respect where I had to figure it out and find a way to make a way, right? So I could have accepted things, or I could have that awareness, and awareness is the catalyst to change anything, to where, hey, I can choose to do this. I can choose my path. And a lot of times I'll do this question when I speak to people or speak in front of groups about this, where I'll ask this question: what's a lot of money to you? Because money is a very emotional subject, right? But if you think your first answer, what's a lot of money, write that down. Don't just, what pops in your head, write that down. When I say what is six figures? When you hear six figures, write that down. The majority of the time, asking a lot of money, I'll get between 100,000 and 500,000. When I say six figures, I'll get 100,000. My next question is, why isn't it 999,999? Why isn't it 50 million? That's because their level is set there. That's where their level's set. That's their threshold. And chances are, in most cases, that's either what they're making or the top end of what they're going to be making, whatever those numbers are. And so once you realize that, you can change that threshold, you can change your whole world and everything else. So that's probably the most important thing, to establish values for yourself, because you're doing it from true choice and not doing it being run from something in the past.
That is incredibly powerful. So what I'm hearing is we don't have to just accept what values that we've been brought up with. We can manually change our values and choose what we want as far as the standard of living that we deserve. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. There's a lot of great values that you get through those influences growing up. The key is choosing whether to keep them or not, right? When you choose it, it's you doing it. We're a product of our choices in life and in all that we do, right? So why shouldn't we be choosing our values? Why shouldn't we be choosing the way we think? Why shouldn't we be choosing how we approach our day, approach our life, approach our relationships, our business, everything else? Why should we just react, right? Isn't it a lot better when you are deliberate about things in your life? When you're deliberate about stuff, you're that much more successful at it. So it's the same kind of thing. It's just, putting it in that context of teaching your mind and reframing things in your mind to be that and what you want it to be. So it's not an easy task. It's a lifelong process. I still react to things. That's my wife. So it's, you're never going to be perfect at it, but you can do a lot of little things in your life. Like, for example, looking right over there is my attitude board. So right in front of me in my office here, every morning I come in, seems like a really cheesy thing, right? I've been doing this for over a decade, but I got a board that says, what attitude will you choose to have today? And it says, great, fair, or poor, right? So every morning I come in, I have to circle one of those, right? And not once in 10 years have I ever circled fair or poor, right? So when things aren't going right, or something doesn't happen, I start to feel that energy, that bubbling up inside. I'm looking at it, and I chose to have a great attitude today. So you know what? I chose to have a great attitude today. I'm not going to let this get me down. I'm not going to let this affect me. We're going to move on. We're going to do that sort of thing. So you need little reminders and things like that to keep you, keep you sane, if you will, and keep you going, because the subconscious is a really powerful thing.
That's huge, and I think the fact that we're really diving into this from your experiences and you're actually giving us a real actionable item that we can do. I think that's hugely powerful to really drive home that point. So let's move a little further into your history. Let's talk about that time when you started your first business at 5 years old, selling those flags. So what really inspired you to take that leap and start your own business? I mean, it may have just seemed like something fun to do, but that's a huge leap of really taking control and putting your destiny into your own hands. So what was that inspiration for getting started?
I don't know if I can pinpoint the inspiration at 5. If I thought hard enough on it, I probably could, but we did take too long. I think at that age, I've always had a high energy, right? That's a natural thing for me. People have natural things. You got to embrace your natural things too, right? So I've always been on the go, always high energy, always looking for things to do. And I think what happened is that I said I wanted something, and my mom said I'd have to find a way to get it. Like, she wasn't just going to give me the money for it or just get it for me. And so that's how I started thinking about, okay, how can I get this? And that's a powerful thing. And I think that's something that's a great lesson for whether you're an entrepreneur or anything. A lot of times a lot of parents will just say no, right? I don't even know if my mom realized what she was doing here, but a lot of parents will just say, no, you can't have it, or you can't, no, right? That's a very debilitating statement. Even when you say it to yourself, it stops your brain from thinking right now. You're done, move on to the next thing, right? But when you're faced with a challenge or an outcome that seems like it can't be done, or that you would almost say no, if you ask, well, how could I do this? How could I make this a reality? That starts to create a part of your brain. It starts you thinking. It starts you saying, asking yourself, well, what can I do? How could I make this happen? Is there a way, right? And that feeds to will, and that's where you get that phrase, where there's a will, there's a way, and all that stuff. So then you start that process of figuring out. So, for me, it was, really, I wanted something. I can't remember what it was, but it was then figuring out how to get it. So, hey, I can sell American flags and take my little red wagon up and down the street and, do that, right? So that's the impetus for, that time in my life.
That's great. And I really do think that, like you were saying, the subconscious mind is a very powerful thing, because that trigger of, hey, I want something, and I can imagine as a 5-year-old, you're like, I want this thing and I will settle for nothing else besides this one thing. Then that gets imprinted, if you will, into that subconscious, and then we can figure out how to get it.
Right.
And I think that's hugely powerful. And for everybody that's listening, I highly encourage you to go back and listen to these things that Dave has been saying, because these are a lot of very, very powerful techniques that at the surface may seem like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But if you go back and listen to it a couple of times and really implement those things, they're very powerful. They're very powerful. So, Dave, let's move along a little bit to your high school years. Now, you talked about how you started a few businesses and you were making money and you paid for your own education, which is incredible. I mean, that is an incredible feat. So can you talk about what businesses you were running and how did you do it at such a young age?
Well, so in high school, I did all sorts of things, right? So, you name it, I played sports and stuff. So it was mainly like summer and then like winter gigs, because I ran track and played football. But you name it, I did it. So everything from bricklaying to roofing, all that type of stuff, loading trucks at FedEx to even selling TVs at a company that doesn't exist anymore called Service Merchandise, and Burger King and everything in between, right? Because again, from the time that I could work, my parents used to say, you have really expensive taste. You're going to work a lot. So I was always looking again for the how to make it happen. And so I would do these jobs, but then I also started, like a lot of kids do, I started a lawn business on the side that actually took off and got pretty big, right? So that's, that was really the business throughout most of high school to the end of high school, where I found direct sales. So if everybody's familiar with direct sales, there's everything from the network marketing side of it to just selling things direct. I actually found Cutco Knives, which a lot of people have been through and done. It's a great program. I recommend for any high school kid, if you're listening, if you want to learn to sell, go with those guys. Try it out. Even if you do it for a few months, you will have a great skill set when it comes to selling, because they have a wonderful way of teaching people and everything else. I was fortunate. I had a lot of good connections at that time, friends, family, people like that really wanted to share in the goal of helping me be successful. So I was actually, it was funny, the office that I was in, the legend of Cutco, John Rulin, who a lot of people might know because he wrote a book called Giftology, which is a really popular book, and he's been on all kinds of stuff these days, was in. He was the first guy ever to sell $10,000 in his first 10 days. I was the second. So John and I have this kind of kinship, over the years that we've had around that, kind of being the two guys that did that. And so, yeah, it kind of went from there. And then I just kept doing that into college. It was flexible. It was something that I could do that allowed me to, I played sports in college as well, too. I ended up playing football in college as well. So that helped me pay for some school and everything else. So, so I used the Cutco selling on weekends and the other time, summer and all that, to kind of fill the gaps. And then I did other odd things too. You'd probably find a picture of me out there dressed like a Blues Clues or something like that. I used to do kids' birthday parties and stuff like that. I got paid $25 an hour to do it as a college kid, So take the job that you want. So it was just one of those things where, find a way, make a way, though, do the things you need to do.
That's incredible. So as you were going through high school and college, how did your identity develop over that time? Did it change from when you were a youngster? How did it develop over that span of time?
There's some core things that I think were always there. Being driven, having that kind of, that asking how and figuring things out and not taking no for an answer, sometimes to my detriment. That stayed. Where I really had to make a leap, going from college to the real business world, was learning how to lead. That's where I really had to make the leap. Now, I've been a star player. I've been a captain on teams and stuff like that, but that's a lot different than leading in the real world, leading in a workspace, leading an organization or a group of people, inspiring them, all that sort of thing. In fact, when I first got tested, when I went into the corporate world, into sales, I was in my first year in sales in the corporate world. My first 2 years, I was extremely successful. So I was rookie of the year in a Fortune 500 and then representative of the year the next year, right? And what that did is that obviously when you do that, that starts to fast track you into other things. Everyone wants to know what you're doing, how you're succeeding. They want to teach it. All that stuff starts to happen. So they started testing me to get like a baseline for the type of reps that they wanted to hire, right? And on all the different tests that they have out there, the different, all your Wonderlicks and all the different ones that they have, SPQ Gold, I remember all those. I tested like 0 on empathy, like 0. Because I was the guy that I smashed my quota every month. I was 100 miles an hour, and I would get the job done, and I didn't have to rely on a bunch of people to do it. It was me. I was making it happen. That works well for an individual sales rep, but the minute that you start to lead people, what happened to me, and it was a great lesson that I had to learn, that I think my vice president knew I had to go through, and they were willing to make that investment which was not an investment, it was really a loss for me to go through it, because the first time they put me in a management role, I blew up the whole team and had almost all of them put on me because I tried to make them all me. Right?
Right.
They call that being a pace setter when it comes to management terms. And so I had to take that step back, and I'm, having lunch with the vice president after it all happened, and they're like, "So what'd you learn?" I'm like, well, I learned that not everybody is me. And they're like, so we had the whole conversation about what it means to truly lead people and to help make them the best in who they are with the skills they have and the way they do things, instead of making it yours or trying to impress yourself or your skill set upon them. So it's a tough lesson to learn, but that, really made a difference. And, we ultimately that same year, we turned that office around. We did about 25%, above the previous year. And then it went from there. And then I kind of became a turnaround expert, as well as training a lot of the rookie sales reps. The company was Paychecks. So it's a big payroll HR company. So I did that for about 6 or 7 years, but on the side, I was investing, right? So I was investing in, when you're successful like that, you have excess cash, all that stuff. So I was investing in real estate. I was investing in other businesses. And that's where I met Eric Mueller, my partner in GROW Technologies, who had kind of the software and everything initially built, was looking for a way to go to market, was the tech genius guy, right? But not so much the sales genius guy, right? And that's what he was looking for. So when we came together, we kind of had a nice yin and yang that's really done well with each other over the years, because we balanced each other out really well from the sides of the business, right? And that's one of the reasons I think it's been as successful as it has. And so that's kind of where that came from. And after about 6-7 years of kind of really learning and understanding. I created my 4 rules of leading and everything with that, put them to work, show that they worked and everything else. GROW.THRIVE had gotten to a point where it could sustain having me on. So I went and, took about a 60% pay cut to do it, but made that leap and we, took off from there and never looked back. So, yeah.
So this big business that you're talking about, kind of the behemoth, if you will, for those in the audience who are not entirely familiar with it, can you describe it and talk about it and really talk about the origins of it and how you grew it?
Yeah, so GROW.THRIVE Technologies, for everybody, we're basically, the easiest way to explain it is we're a data and software company and management company in the travel space. That's our vertical. So what we do is we manage data. Think of us like data plumbers. That's one way to think about it, is we get data from all these sources and make sense of it all for our clients. And then as well as visualize that data, right? Showcase it for the different needs they have. Travel is a really weird industry. It's built on systems from the 1960s. And there are no standards for anything when it comes to data. So you need kind of, that group that sits as the middleman and can make sense of it all and do what you need to do with it. And that's what we do. We have about 20 plus products in our product line, but that's at the core of what we do. And so it actually started, my business partner, Eric Mueller, had founded the company actually in 1996 as an IP holding company. He had been in the travel industry he's been in the for over 30 years now, but he'd been in the industry over a decade at that point, had done a lot of really great things, and we had a pretty astounding name in the space from a tech space. He actually built the first graphic reporting system, believe it or not. There was a time where there weren't visual reporting systems that you could see and see graphs and all that stuff. He built that for travel. And so when he went out on his own, he started a couple companies, one of them being GROW.THRIVE, another one being more of your traditional IT firm and software development shop. Did a lot of business in those, but GROW.THRIVE was always sitting there, right? GROW.THRIVE, that was always kind of his baby that he wanted to come back to. And so when we connected up, he was ready for that. He was ready to really make that go. And so we sat down, we looked at, what really needed to be done to make the products in it really viable, how we would sell them, how we'd approach the market, reached out to who our first clients would be, did some market research to make sure we had some people to sell to, and then he and I just started. That's how it started. Me on the weekends and evenings, and him, and all the extra time that he could. That's how it got going. And it grew, really fast. Within, we did a 10-year stint where we grew over 50% a year,
Wow.
Every single year, and then kept going. And nowadays we've got business in over 100 countries, and some of the largest corporations in the world. A lot of the Fortune 500s are our clients, and 50 employees across the world in different areas and stuff, and multiple offices and all that stuff. So it's been an amazing ride, and we've been fortunate to find some amazing people that were the right people that we could put in the right place at the right time along the way. We've had really good luck with that. I'm gonna knock on wood, because I don't know if there's any strategy to that. We just we happen to be able to do that well as we've grown. And part of that's, I think, really, if there's a strategy, it's being honest, open, having really great integrity, and not bullshitting people. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. When people apply for GROW.THRIVE, I tell them this is probably the hardest place you ever work. It is. We live in a crazy world, and you can think about it. An industry with no standards for anything. We service over 200,000 corporations through our footprint, and their businesses are changing every day. It's rapid fire. It never ends. There's always something new, always something going on. We probably get 80 support tickets a day for new stuff that we got to adapt to or do. So, it's in some ways it's a reactive world, right? I call it managed chaos, but the right people thrive in that, and we've been able to find them, and that's what's really set us apart. And that's why there's only a few companies that do what we do now.
That's incredible. So alongside of GROW.THRIVE, what have you been doing? What has your life looked like, and how has how has your time been invested in other areas?
Yeah, so I do have some other businesses. As I mentioned, I started investing in real estate a long time ago. So I still do. I still buy and hold properties, right? A lot of resort property type stuff, as well as managed condo type facilities, things like that. For the more the single family side. And I'm a buy and hold guy, right? So I've been doing that for a long time. So we've got a holding company for that. Along the way too, I had my grandfather, who I mentioned, who had retired, went on to do very well in the stock market. So I grew up like every day, you know, if I was at my grandfather's house, stock channel going by and everything. So I had an interest in the stock side, right? I didn't know what I was doing, but I, you know, at a young age had a lot of excess cash. And it's like, what do you do with that? You know, how do you turn that into more money and create it so that it can do good things? And you can use it to invest in ideas and people and all this other stuff. So I created a system. It took about 3 years to create. It's called 12-minute trading. So 12minutetrading.com, people can find it. But it's a system to where I don't have to babysit things. I basically can set up a trade in less than 12 minutes a day, manage things, because I was working 80 hours a week on the go. I didn't want to have to babysit and all that stuff. It's a system that self-defends itself and creates about a 16-17% return a year on your money consistently. And we've done that for the newsletter and the stuff that we have out on. It's been out for about 8 years now. And we track every trade and all that stuff. So that was kind of thing that just kind of came about. In that 3-year journey, I lost about $100,000 figuring out how to do this. So anybody who's gone down that route of trading before and trying to do it, you know, you're going to take your lumps to learn things. So I call it my investing education, which was well worth it. I made that back, you know, multi-fold now. But so we've got actually students all over the world that are, you know, learn from that strategy, and it's really cool. About 5 years ago, we adopted our daughter Hannah from China, and coming back with her, you know, going back to that same conversation about conditioning, right? So I'm hyper aware to that. So at 18 months old, you know, I have this child who has had conditioning that I can't fathom at this point. You know, she was found underneath the bridge at 4 weeks old in China. She grew up in an orphanage. And so, but I'm hypersensitive to the minute that she's in my arms, you know, I'm, you know, conditioning her. I'm shaping her, at least for now, until she hopefully someday, you know, has that realization that she can choose. And so, I found myself in all these teachable moments. I was really fortunate in my younger days to go study with people like Zig Ziglar and Brian Tracy, you know, and actually wrote the cover board for my book, and people like Tony Robbins and all these, you know, even a couple billionaires I got a chance to sit with for a couple hour lunches and pick their brain type stuff. So I learned all this stuff. That's actually how my book came about. And it was amazing, though, with this little one, all these teachable moments, all these things were bubbling up that I'd forgotten, that I'd learned through the past from people like this. And I'm going, holy crap, how much of this stuff have I forgotten over the years? You know, what am I missing, you know? Right. And I said, there's got to be a way to immortalize this stuff so that Hannah, you know, can learn from her daddy and his misfit friends long after we're dead and gone. Really, that's how it came about. And as I thought about it, you know, every entrepreneur is a misfit. You know, we all have a weird, you know, just quirkiness to us in some way, shape, or form, right? And that's what makes us entrepreneurs. And yeah, I'd say everybody's a misfit in some way. Everybody's got their own style, their own uniqueness. And so what I really realized about entrepreneurs, now that I've done the Misfit Entrepreneur Podcast, and we've done, you know, tons of interviews, it's really helped put it into focus. But what I've realized is that it's not usually one big thing that people do that sets them apart. It's a lot of little things that they do just a little bit better. You know, a little tweak here, a little tweak there adds up to a huge advantage. Think about like a race in the Olympics. It's 1/100th of a second. The things that have to go into making you faster by 1/100th of a second, arm placement, hand position, your first step, how you start, all that stuff, you know, it equates to that, to the winning time, right? And it's the same thing in entrepreneurship. And so that's what the show is about. I started the Misfit Entrepreneurs this way to find these unique things and tease them out of high-performing entrepreneurs, the highest performing in their fields around the world, so I could leave it behind for Hannah so that she could learn from it and use it in her life someday, and you know, anybody else that wanted to find it. And so I didn't know if anybody else would listen, and we released it about 18 months ago, and you know, here we are. We do 4 episodes a month, and we're doing a little over 50,000 downloads a month in 80 countries, right? So I just, you know, it was a side project that turned into now it's a real business, you know. So it's kind of one of those ones you fall into.
That's incredible. And you know, I was doing some research before the interview, and there was a tagline, if you will, that really stood out, and it was "Unleash Your Inner Misfit." So
right.
Can you talk a little bit about how that tagline really came into be, and then how we as entrepreneurs can act on it? How can we unleash our inner misfit?
Well, and that's the point of the show. I ask every guest after I do the introduction, are you ready to unleash your inner misfit? Because the things they take for granted, the things that they do just naturally that, set them apart and everything, they don't really, not a lot of times they don't take the time to think about it, right? And that's the inner misfit. That's those unique things. Like, I believe one great episode of a show like this one or anyone like that can change someone's life, right? Even if it's one person, it can change their life. It can give them an idea. It can spur something. It can confirm something for them. It can, make them think in a different way and put them on a totally different trajectory, right? And so that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for those few things that I can get out of this entrepreneur, their inner misfit, that somebody can hear and learn and take and maybe put into their life, or spurs an idea for them or makes them think differently, right? And so that's what that came from. So every one of you have your own inner misfit, and you can unleash it any way that you want to. But think about it. Just think about what are those little things that I do, just maybe a little bit better that set me apart. How do I make sure I'm doing those all the time? And I've come up with this formula for this, and I use it in business and everything else. And I'm actually going to be putting a book out about it later this year. And it's the DCP formula is what I call it. Discipline, consistency, and persistence. Now that sounds like things that you have to be successful in a business or anything. When you think about it, discipline means doing the things that you need to do, even when you don't want to do them, right? Now the next one is consistency. Being consistent, doing that day in and day out. See, you can be disciplined for one day. That's not going to do any good. You got to be there, and you got to show up day in, day out, over and over and over and over again, right? That's the consistency part mixed with the discipline. You got to have both. But even if you're disciplined and consistent, if you aren't willing to persevere, if you aren't willing to bust through the walls that you're going to run into and aren't willing to have the will to do it, you're going to stagnate. You're going to be disciplined and consistent, but you're going to plateau. You see this a lot of times with companies and stuff. They reach a certain level and they plateau because they've hit that barrier. They're not willing to innovate further. They're not willing to change to meet, especially in today's age, the changes that are happening economically, technologically. I mean, ask Kodak about that, and others, right? So, so you got to have all three to really be successful. So when I work with somebody or something like that, the first thing I go to is, okay, let's look at the different areas of your business or whatever the venture is. Where are we disciplined? Where are we consistent? Where do we have to persist through? Where are we not disciplined, right? Where do we need to be more consistent? Because it is a lot of times that simple. Just upping your game in a couple areas in a business can literally double your business if you do it right. So those three things are super important when it comes to just running your life and everything too. So that's a big thing that I found when it comes to really bettering your business and yourself.
So it seems like you have a lot of things going on. It seems like you have grass going on, and you have the Misfit Entrepreneur, and you have your 12-minute trading system, and I'm sure there are your real estate investments and all these different things. But what is your biggest focus right now?
Well, my biggest focus is still grass. That's where I spend the most of my time. Okay, albeit every year it gets a little bit less and less. I've always said to Eric, the day that we're not needed is the best day of our lives, right? And that's what you're working towards. Right? When the business can run entirely without you, even not having to ask you a question or anything, then you're really in a good spot. And because you build it, it can continuously grow and scale and everything. It doesn't need you to make it go. And we're actually getting a lot closer to that, a lot faster than I thought. So it's pretty exciting. So, outside of that, though, the trading is designed to spend less than 12 minutes a day and maybe 45 minutes to an hour on the weekends. And that's kind of my trade journal, my newsletter. So I just put that out there for others to see if they want to follow me and stuff, right? So that doesn't take that much time. What took the time was learning the system and perfecting it and spending 3 years immersing in it and going through the losses and learning what I did wrong and putting it all together. That took the time. The Misfit Entrepreneur, outside of that, is where I spend a lot of my time. Because there's a lot of things that surround the Misfit Entrepreneur. It's not just, the podcast itself, but there's speaking that I do through it. There's other things that, that happen now because of it. I have an event that I do with a gentleman by the name of Evan Money called GROW.THRIVE.REVIVE. That's really taken off and become very popular. And that was kind of an offshoot of the podcast and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things surrounding it. So more and more that's taking, filling the time up, which is great. I love it.
That's incredible. So moving forward, where do you see your life going? And I'm talking about big goals, like 5, 10, 20-year goals.
So here's the thing. I don't predict out and I don't plan for 5, 10, or 20 years because I have no freaking clue what's going to happen in 5, 10, or 20 years. Okay? Here's what I do know. I don't have any regrets because everything that had to happen exactly the way it did to get me here today. I mean, literally, a rock had to hit another rock in space correctly for me to be talking to you right now. A soldier took the wrong step on a battlefield throughout history. I'm not here. And Hannah's story really resonates that and really solidifies that for me because we never should have had that child. Hannah was actually, I'll give it to you real quick because it does dovetail with your question. So Hannah, the way adoptions work is once you go through all the adoption paperwork and all the stuff and you're ready to adopt, they release files to the world every month. And so those files come out and it's kind of first come, first serve who's been in line, right? So for like 5 months, we didn't get to see a file at all, right? And when you go through the process, one of the things you have to do in Hannah's case, she was what was called a waiting child, which means she has an ailment of some sort. She's not perfect in Chinese eyes, right? So we had to go through all these ailments that we would accept, heart conditions, all kinds of these different things. And my wife saw that there was hyper and hypothyroid on the checklist. Okay, now that's a family member that has that. You basically take a pill to regulate your thyroid gland either way. Okay, it's pretty, not something people think about. A lot of people have it, but not a big deal at all. Our adoption counselor says to us point blank, hyper and hypothyroid. We've never had a kid in like 40 years ever have that. And you sure you want to check that? My wife goes, yeah, just keep it on there. We've got a family member, so on, so right? So we go through everything. We go through 5 months, things coming out to the world, right? And all of a sudden we get a call out of the blue. It's middle of September. And we get a call out of the blue. Files had already been released for the month. And our adoption counselor says, we have a child for you. I'm like, what do you mean you have a child for us? The files have already been out and everything. She's like, well, we actually work directly with one orphanage in the whole country of China. It usually deals with older kids. But this little girl was left underneath a bridge just down the block from it. So they took her there. And so she's grown up there. She's about a year old. Okay? And the only reason that I'm calling you is because she has hyperthyroid and you're the only people in our database in the whole world that popped up for her. And we said, well, send us the file and everything else. And you can imagine 10 seconds later, we're like, yes, let's, we want to move forward. And so we go to China, we go through everything, we get Hannah, we bring her home, we go to all the doctors and everything else. And after about 6 months of testing and everything else, the doctor says, she was misdiagnosed. She doesn't have anything. She's perfectly healthy. She should have never even been in the waiting child program. She should have been in the healthy child program. And so when people ask me, why'd you go to China to get your daughter? I say, because that's where she was. And it also, if that story doesn't tell you that there is a higher power or something that's guiding us in this world, or in this life, I don't know what does, because there's no way that child should have ever been ours. It was destined to happen exactly as it did. It never will. So life will continue to unfold like that for me in 5, 10, or 20 years. I'm going to keep doing the things that I'm doing. I'm going to keep helping as many people as I can help, show them, the different ways that they can create the lives they want, and help them learn things like I went through and was fortunate to learn from and find these amazing mentors that, help me learn things that a lot of people never learn in their lives and put into practice and stuff. So my goal is to help people do that. And as long as I'm doing that in some way, shape, or form, I'll consider myself, fairly lucky and successful.
That's an incredible story. That is truly an incredible story. So, Dave, I really want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. I actually just have just a few more questions for you. I really do appreciate your time. The first one being, is there anything about yourself that you think is an important part of who you are that I did not ask you about today? In other words, what did I miss?
I don't think you missed anything. I think there's a lot of things that make up everybody. And at different moments, you're different and need to be different, right? So I think the biggest thing, and it probably counts, understanding self. is one of the things that really helped me to be successful. But you have to be willing to do it. And you have to be willing to make the changes and be okay to sit with yourself and say, hey, I'm messed up in this area. I need to fix it, right? I need to change who I am and how I believe and how I think and how I, treat people in this area or act or, perceive, right? That's a big thing, I think, for anybody. And if you're willing to do that for yourself, you can do anything, right? So, I wouldn't say that you didn't cover it. It's just something that for me was probably one of the biggest epiphanies and things in my life that really helped me to do the things that I've done.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So for everybody who's listening, I highly encourage you guys and gals to go back and listen a couple times, re-listen to this, re-watch this, and really, really hear what Dave has been saying, because he's been dropping some serious value bombs, and there are some things that can absolutely change your life. So I highly encourage you to go back through and listen a couple times. Now, Dave, for the people who they want to get more involved, they're fired up, they're feeling it, how do they take the next step with you? What's the next step for those people?
So the best way to find me, misfitentrepreneur.com. You can go there. You can sign up for the podcast and all the different mediums. I'm on all the different social networks. So either as Dave Lukas, Lukas, or as Misfit Entrepreneur. So you can find me that way. If you're interested in learning more about the Grow, Thrive, Revive event, we have our next one coming out in October of this year. Just go to www.GROW.THRIVE.REVIVE.com. You can read all about it from there and everything as well. So we're doing it out at the Broadmoor, which is it's in the middle of Colorado Springs, right below Pikes Peak. It's probably the most beautiful hotel that I've ever been to. It's one of my favorites. And so I told Evan, we got to have one there. So it's already got a lot of people that are signing up for it and stuff, and it's limited to 25. So if you have an interest, go out, check it out. It'll be filled up here probably within the next month or so, but really, really fun, and really teach you a lot about how to grow as a person and double your business.
Fantastic. So everybody, again, I highly encourage you to go and check out the podcast, go and register for the event. As I understand it, there are very few spots left, so the time is a ticking, so make sure to take some action real fast and go register for that. Dave, I can't thank you enough. I really do appreciate your time today. So many things I can only imagine how precious your time is, so thank you so much for that. Right on cue.
So for the next call. No, thank you guys so much for everything. Hey, that's what happens when it's live, right? Thank you so much, and thank you to you and the audience. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for listening. I know there's a lot here. So if you ever have any questions or anything, want to reach out, you can reach out to me through the Misfit site. I read and respond to every question that I get from people personally. So if I can help in any way, let me know.
Great. Fantastic. So everybody, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you guys on the next episode. Have a great day, and don't forget to turn your dreams into reality. Let's do it. Have a good one.